welcome to the Construction Record Podcast. I'm digital media Warren Frey, and with me today is
staff writer for the Journal of Commerce, Russell Hixson, from my East Vancouver bedroom studio overlooking my garden, which is currently barren.
Aaron. That's not good.
Well, I'm working on it. We're working on it.
Good man. You were here downtown last week for a conference, so if you could elucidate us on what that was all about.
Speaking of gardens and things that grow, I was at the BC Council of Forest Industries COFI conference in downtown Vancouver last week. And I attended many sessions, and there was some themes that definitely came through. Various speakers talked about some of the risks and opportunities that face the forestry sector, which obviously, due to recent global events have changed wildly in the past few years. One of them obviously is COVID. COVID's impact on major importers and exporters like China has obviously impacted supply chains. They showed diagrams of Shanghai's ports where ships are backed up. And with recent waves of COVID in China, the restrictions are definitely slowing things down there. The war in Ukraine was something that nobody expected in the forestry sector, and risk experts talked about how they knew that it was a risk, but they definitely were not expecting a full-blown war in the Ukraine, and that's impacting a lot of things because due to sanctions, who supplies who with wood is definitely changing. They see probably China is going to soak up most of the Russian wood that's no longer going to be going to Europe due to sanctions and different things like that. Their wood's cheap, and they believe China's probably going to take advantage of that. And then they also talked about how they believe that these crises are also going to probably have a renewed interest in LNG form in BC. I think many people thought that BC missed the window on having a major LNG boom. I mean, to be fair, we do have LNG Canada, which is a massive LNG project, but I believe there were more than a dozen that were proposed. And I think people thought that we would get around 2 or 3, and we only got 1 so far. And so experts at the conference said that due to these global instabilities like the war in Ukraine and supply chain issues, and the high cost of LNG right now, and Russia being tied up, they think there is probably going to be a renewed round of interest in LNG in BC, which is huge news for BC, because even one LNG project could be tens of billions of dollars of investment.
I remember years ago talking to Keith Sasha, who was then head of the VRCA, and
Yes.
that was around the time that they were proposing 12 or so, however many there were. And I'm off to the side with me, said, yeah, there's 12 that have been proposed, but really 1 or 2 are going to get approved. And I was like, and he was right. All those years later, he was absolutely right.
So anyways, yeah, it was a great conference, a lot of really interesting information, and just some of the opportunities that the forestry sector has. So I talked a bit about some of the doom and gloom with COVID and the Russian war in Ukraine, but they also see this continued shift towards a greener economy, and they believe things like mass timber, biofuels, these are all things that there's a lot of capital that's looking for projects, and they believe that the forestry sector has a major role to play in the global shift to more greener technologies. So there's a lot of good things on the horizon for the wood sector, especially BC's wood sector. So yeah.
Okay, great. And from the East, we have updates from
Lindsey Cole, editor of the Daily Commercial News and Journal of Commerce.
What's happening in the East?
What's cracking out here, eh? Well, there's a few things on the go, as always. Quite a fluid situation's happening in Ontario as we speak. I've spoken about it before, I think a couple weeks back now, pertaining to the bargaining agreements within Ontario. They have expired officially now. So they were, I believe it was April 30th when the ICI sectors expired. We've had some major developments. I would say staff writer Don Wall has been covering it extensively, doing very in-depth coverage and trying to get as many trades agreement details as he can. It is quite an operation to get all that information together, but we have had some collective agreements reached, and there's been some relatively smooth situations. I mean, the electrical sector did okay after some bargaining. The carpenters have apparently reached an agreement. However, with that said, as much as there's been successes, and as I said, I've only mentioned a couple, but there's also been some strikes that are currently taking place. We were notified that in the residential sector alone, as of May 2nd, there were 6 strikes. And then there is also one in the ICI sector. I believe it's the operating engineers. So obviously that's going to cause some delays to projects. It's a labor disruption, right? So anytime that's going to happen, you have to watch it from a coverage spectrum fairly fluidly. It could change by the hour as negotiations take place. So we're just following that along really, really closely, while also seeing the impacts it has on the larger spectrum with the various trades. It's always a trickle down effect if you think about it. So depending on what trades are on strike or looking to ratify deals or you name it, the negotiations are still taking place. So no matter how you slice it, there are impacts to all facets of the industry, in my opinion. So stay tuned is all I can really say on that one, because it is such an evolving process. And from our perspective, since these come about, I think it's every three years, I think it is, or every few years anyway. When these come along, it's always ample coverage for us on the one hand, but it's also kind of exciting to see how the current economic climate of the day really impacts these agreements. So when you have supply chain issues, when you've got inflation, when we're still in a pandemic, all of those things are impacting these negotiations. And there's various elements that, obviously wages is a big and has been at the forefront of most of these talks, but travel's in there, and there's other various elements that are being considered that are outside the usual realm. So it's just kind of interesting to see how the current topics of the day impact these agreements. So that's one thing that we have on the go that's keeping Don on his toes. The second thing we have on the go, and we will have on the go throughout this week and probably a little bit into next, not only is it Safety and Health Week in construction, so we will have Dawn and Angela covering some events that are taking place throughout the week. We had a good preview story that was out on Monday and kind of highlights where some of the themes are this year, which is building back connections and trying to reinstill the importance of safety on job sites as we continue to evolve through this pandemic. So I would say stay tuned for that when it comes to our health and safety coverage. Both Don and Ange will be out at things. But more in addition to Health and Safety Week in construction, it's also Mental Health Week across Canada. So we have a good story that Angela wrote up that will be featured tomorrow. It's on the students from George Brown College who are part of the augmented education program. And in particular, they're taking part in the construction craft worker program. So these students have had maybe some mental health challenges or addiction issues, and they are able to take part in this program. And what's pretty cool about it, I think, is the fact that they're not doing their typical trades training or skills training in the classroom. They're actually going out to this site in the woods, apparently, in Clarington, which is out in Durham region, and they are building cabins for a wellness retreat place. So it's called, the property's called Mystic Pines, and they are helping to build these cabins for living quarters for people who will need it in the future. So it's kind of cool how everything in this story comes full circle, right? So it really fit the bill for launching it during this week. And yeah, I think it's quite appropriate. So do check that out if you want tomorrow, and give it a read.
And if you'd like to hear other episodes of The Construction Record, we're on Spotify, Apple Music, and Amazon Music, and on the Daily Commercial News and Journal of Commerce websites. Thanks for listening.